Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's presentation, Customer Communications in the Age of Coronavirus, the Next Phase. I'm Kristen, and I'm on the marketing team here at Movable Ink, and I'll be serving as your moderator for today. If at any time you need to step away from your computer to tend to your kids, your pets, or your spouse, we completely understand. We will follow up with a recording of today's presentation so that you won't miss a thing. And likewise, as all of our presenters today are remote, we thank you in advance for your patience if we have any connectivity issues or should you hear any of those aforementioned kids or pets or spouses in the background. Very quickly, on today's agenda, we will quickly introduce you to our presenters. We will run through the current state of affairs and then give you some insightful brand insights for travel, retail, media and technology, FinServ, and key takeaways. And we will end with Q&A session. So with that, I will hand it over to Allison.
Thank you so much, Kristen. So just want to echo the thanks for everyone for joining us today. We know this is a very hectic and, frankly, stressful time for a lot of people, both personally and professionally. And we also know that everybody is working from home, like us. So, just to echo what Kristen said about the children or pets or stray, grumpy, unshaven roommates or spouses who might walk by in the back, not only am I not going to apologize for that, but I actually think it'd be fun if we did like bingo. And if you guys at home want to play along, and if you capture the list of things that interrupt this webinar today, whoever gets the most, if you want to tweet at Movable Ink, we'll find some fun swag pack to send to you. So pay attention because there are some new puppies in the mix, and there are definitely some stray children. Mine are like very high odds, likely about to burst into this room. So just wanted to take a second, if you want to go to the next slide, Kristen, and just reintroduce the team before we get into the content today. So just quickly, by way of sort of a little bit of background, I have been with Movable Ink for actually my 8th year, and I've had the pleasure of working with our clients on the client experience team for the vast majority of that time. And our CX team at Movable Ink is mostly former clients and partners who have terrific insight into what it takes not just to use Movable Ink technology, but very, very well, and they bring that into our culture and in how we work with our clients. About 2+ years ago, we were really expanding the CX organization, and we decided to really double down on that insight. And so we decided to carve out a client strategy and bring in experts who had basically run email organizations within their respective verticals. And the first person who I was lucky enough to recruit was Julio Lopez, who established the overall practice with me, and then specifically the retail practice. And then shortly after that, Katie White, who you guys might have heard speak at Think Summit a few years ago, came to us from Hotel Tonight. And then from there, we added Jackie Mattia to start financial services. And shortly after that followed Elle and Naveen. And essentially what our mission is to really live and breathe the ethos of our clients within the organization and represent that to products, go-to-market, sales, and really the entire organization. We've expanded the team significantly. Obviously, we have all that vertical coverage, and this year we've launched in EMEA as well, which is very exciting. And this is the team that is thinking about issues that impact our clients day in, day out. They're also working with our clients on short-form consulting engagements. So we've been spending a lot of time with our clients lately, both doing brainstorms, stand-ups, gut checks, whatever you call it. We started getting pulled into things probably around the first week of March. And so pretty quickly started doing a lot of educational content internally, and then purposed that into the first webinar, which we did 2 weeks ago. And we will be continuing to publish and produce content on this as long as it's relevant. This webinar, we decided to introduce our good friend Tom from MailCharts, who's a long-time friend of the company, and he'll tell you more about MailCharts. Have the team now introduce themselves. So if you want to go to the next slide. Awesome.
Hey, everyone. Yeah. Hey, everybody. This is Jackie Mattia. I am, as Allison mentioned, one of our associate directors of client strategy covering the financial services vertical. My background is both in FinServ and email marketing. I joined Movable this past February from Citi's Global Consumer Bank. And then before that, I worked for years with the ESP Cheetah Digital, where I primarily worked with clients in the financial services space. I know that we're all sharing a quick fun fact about our, working from home situation to kick us off. So mine is that I recently made what I think is the best purchase of all time, which is the world's most comfortable memory foam office chair. So I will hand it over to Elle.
Thanks, Jackie. I'm Elle Cross, Associate Director of Client Strategy, also focusing on financial services. I also joined Movable Ink from Citibank, where I was for 5 years, focusing on digital marketing and servicing communications, including crisis communications and planning. And in addition to my financial services background, I have worked in the travel space at TravelClick, which is a SaaS-based travel technology company. And there I work closely with large and small hotels, OTAs, travel agents, etc. Some of you know Katie White. I know Allison mentioned her already. She's our amazing Associate Director of Travel and Hospitality, who's currently on maternity leave. So today I'm helping out and covering off on travel while she's out. And my work from home has been very interesting. 2 weeks ago, I rescued a puppy. So Allison mentioned you might hear some puppy barks in the background. That would be coming from my house. It's definitely been a welcome distraction during this time. And on to the next slide, Kristen.
Hi, I'm Naveen Wall, Associate Director of Client Strategy. I lead our media and technology vertical. I'm actually a former client of Movable Ink myself. I come from SiriusXM, where I led their primary engagement newsletter that was personalized based on listening preference. Prior to that, I also led CRM over at Shutterstock. I don't have a fun fact, but I do have a tip. One thing that's making work from home life really easy or much easier for me is having headphones that are identifiable so you can actually see them. Not only does it improve call quality, but it also acts as an identifier to say I'm on a call if you've got other people in the room with you.
Great. And my name is Julio Lopez, Associate Director of Retail Strategy at Movable Ink. I spent the last 10 years working on retail strategy in the US and in Europe, and have been with Movable Ink for the last 2 years. I'm certainly looking forward to sharing some key retail insights with you all. And my fun fact is I now graduated to having a morning robe and an evening robe, and I have not put on jeans in about 9 days.
I think that might win. Just going to call it. Don't want to cut you off there, guys, but I think that wins.
That's actually been my favorite part about working from home is the shock of working with Julio and he's in his robe. It was very funny. I'm Tom, and I am the CEO of MailCharts. And we are a company that archives email marketing messages. And I'll explain a little bit more about what we do. And then me personally, our company got started as strategic consultants for brands of really all sizes. And my work from home thing is we are trying to still do date nights. So me and my wife are trying to find local restaurants that we'll we'll order takeout and then kind of treat it as something fun, even though we're in the exact same place that we have been all day long. It's fun to get the takeout. We feel like we're doing a little bit of what we can to help with those restaurants, and then we don't have to cook as well. So it's been very nice. In terms of getting back to us here at MailCharts, we help brands and retailers and email marketers plan better campaigns using our data with exporting that data and easy to use reports. And so as we take a look at the state of affairs in the email world, we're in a really good position to work with the Movable Ink team to review that data and start to look at what's being said and how do we move from the initial shock of messages and what is kind of this next phase. So our data can really provide a stepping stone and a stepping off point for us to take a look industry by industry of what's going on, what's happening, and where do we see trends moving towards, and what does that messaging look for as we adjust to this new normal. And you'll hear us kind of reference that over time. And all the data we have, we're kind of able to compare year over year and where those changes have been, as well as what's going on. So when we think about what's going on globally, this slide should really come as no surprise to everybody on the call. We are getting super saturated in the messaging of coronavirus, whether that's in the emails you're receiving, the websites you're reading, whatever's on TV, and frankly, everybody we talk to. It is everywhere, and it is growing every day, and our data is suggesting that and supporting that. On the email specific side of things, overall, we haven't seen a huge change in email volume. However, over 3/4 of email marketers that we've polled said that they are pausing, canceling, changing campaigns, and reworking that messaging. So we know that there's been a big event, a drastic change for all of us, and now we have to rework. And so we want to look at what can we do in this next phase as we are updating campaigns. You'll see here on the right, we have one from Bloom talking about discounts specifically for healthcare workers, frontline workers, responders. That is obviously a huge change that we wouldn't even have fathomed 2 weeks ago. So what do we think is significant since last year? It's exactly the stuff that you'd expect. And are we overdoing it?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, when you shared those trends with us earlier this week, I knew I just had to share this. It came across my social feed. But you were talking about how our world is becoming highly saturated with this coronavirus content. And this tweet really encapsulates consumer attitudes right now. When I first saw it, I laughed. It's funny, especially if you're living and breathing email marketing like we do. But it does surface some very important questions. Are we doing too much? Are we sending too many messages? And really, we're seeing a little bit more backlash from subscribers who feel that brands are sending too many messages. Now more than ever, before you're scheduling a campaign, you really need to ask yourself, are you helping or are you not? And this email marketing daily post really captures why. Everyone is anxious. You're talking to this anxious audience. So you really need to be careful with your messaging. And, it doesn't look like customers are going to be quick to forgive any transgressions. This report shows that 73% of consumers will note that the way companies are acting during this crisis will affect future purchase decisions. So in the remainder of this webinar, we really want to showcase the trends we're seeing in the different verticals. And it looks like we're going to start with brand insights in travel and hospitality.
Awesome. Thank you, Julio. So let me click forward. So travel, hospitality, restaurants, airlines, cruise lines, hotels, are some of the most impacted organizations to date so far, with government restrictions coming into place, how it's spread across the entire globe. So to start, we wanted to share some stats from Tom at MailCharts and what we're seeing in emails. I think now we're seeing 70% of brands mentioning the virus directly, but Tom, do you want to take us through and give some insight on what they've been talking about and what you're seeing in terms of cadence?
Yeah, so we've seen travel, obviously, travel and hospitality have been, impacted very heavily by what's going on. And overall, most brands, I'm surprised that it's only 70% of the sample that we took are mentioning COVID and coronavirus directly in their messaging. But a third of the emails have some pandemic-related activity in them. Again, I would think it'd be even higher. What we noticed in sending behavior is this industry was actually sending earlier than the other industries. So earlier than March 11th, they were some of the first out of the gate with that messaging. And then since then, sending volume has gone down a bit. And then when we compare what's significant, what is really changing, what's trending, messages from the CEO is more significantly changing in this industry. Focus on customers. And then that big piece about changes in travel plans to date has been a big piece of that messaging that we've seen so far.
Yeah. And I think that makes complete sense. I mean, especially given a lot of the brands that were those first messages are global brands. So as this, we're talking about US stats here, as this has come across the globe, they started to see that impact likely more than just US based organizations. So it makes complete sense. So on our last webinar, we really did focus a lot on what we saw in those early emails that Tom was talking about. And there was a 4 kind of key strategies that we've seen. A shift to local travel opportunities, so kind of focusing on that staycation, road trips, anything like that, especially as people were starting to stay a little bit closer to home. Showcasing safety protocols and what was put into place so that customers had a little bit more of peace of mind as it started to appear in the US. Educating and modifying BAU policies, and then kind of pushing those aspirational bookings for down the road, knowing that you might not have those cancellation fees or the normal protocols that are in place. And then finally, reassuring customers and educating them on what they're doing to keep their customers and employees safe. We know that employees are getting hit hard in a lot of these organizations, and really highlighting what the organization from the top down is doing to support them. Now we're starting to see some of those secondary messages Tom mentioned. In travel and hospitality, loyalty is really important to a lot of people. You know, they work really hard for their miles, they work really hard for their status, and they want to keep it. And in these secondary messages, we're seeing a highlight on that. So a few samples are up here. There are many more, but whether you're telling customers that you're extending the program and they can keep their status year over year or for the next X days, or you won't expire, or just recognizing that it's something that's a high priority for customers and saying, we hear you and we're going to get back to you with what we're doing, but our priority right now is X. It's really important because people want to hear these things. And it goes back to what Julio was saying. Make sure that your message is important for that customer and they're going to find it interesting. We're also seeing an amazing push from the hospitality world on helping. So from hotels that are giving free rooms to those that are on the front lines and working at hospitals and have long commutes home, there's a magnitude of them doing it. Again, just a sampling on this slide, to airlines offering free flights for students to get home, or for those volunteers that are coming to highly impacted areas. It's a really beautiful thing, and it's important to share that with your community as well, because in this situation, we're all in it together. Everyone's experiencing these things, and highlighting what's being done is a really great message. So, as was mentioned, everybody's kind of looking at their calendars and deciding what they should be doing. And travel and hospitality is definitely seeing a decrease in what's going out the door. One thing that we do want to make sure that we highlight to everyone on this call is, what should you be doing at this time? These are just 4 buckets that we want to talk through quickly. First of all, acquisition. So can you promote those aspirational bookings? Right now, people might not be booking for the near term, but everybody wants to travel. I've seen so many backgrounds that are the beaches and the different cities. We all want to get back into that lifestyle. So can you leverage past behaviors to highlight booking for the future, to get people to feel like they want that, they can't wait, they want to get back to normal? Next, transactional messages. I won't call any brands out, but we've definitely seen some cancellation emails that are a little confusing, or, talk to that the person canceled it, but actually the hotel canceled it because they're closing. So as a marketing team, see how you can help your servicing or transactional messaging team and really get a compassionate and clear message out to your customers. As Julio said, 73% of consumers are going to be influenced on how they purchase in the future. So you want every touch point to be important and informational for them. And maybe your transactional team could use your help right now while they're struggling to keep up with everything that's going on. Again, loyalty is so important. A lot of emails get blasted to entire mailing lists. Should you speak to your loyal customers a little bit differently? Tell them what's happening. Tell them how they can help. Can they donate their points? Can they earn more points in certain ways? And just making sure that you have that extra touch for them. And then finally, start thinking about what's next. Timing is unclear. Different states are having different things happen at different times. But can you create something that's really dynamic and can be modified, a shell of what your plan is going to be, so that when we get into that phase, you're ready to go and hit the ground running? And we did want to do a little focus on quick serve restaurants and restaurants in general. Last webinar, we didn't go into this as much. So I think, not surprisingly, more brands are mentioning the virus directly in their content for restaurants, as they're getting hit really hard with government restrictions. But again, Tom, if you want to kind of take us through what you're seeing, that would be great.
Yeah, I think, similarly to travel, I mean, very, very heavily hit. I know I've mentioned that kind of one of the things that I'm enjoying doing, but also feel good about is ordering from restaurants, just knowing how difficult, restaurants, QSRs, just across the board. What's interesting about that is we've seen sending behavior remain pretty much the same, and the message driving very heavily towards takeout, delivery, and even some options that we'll show here about this level of safety and care and no touch and contactless as well. So really providing a very different message about how you can get the food and order. It has shifted very quickly.
Yeah, and I'm the same. I'm also New York based, and us New Yorkers love our takeout and delivery, and I love going out to restaurants in general. So it definitely is a focus that we're seeing, but we're seeing it across the country as those restrictions come into play. So we did want to highlight a few of what we're actually seeing in market. A big focus is on discounts and offerings, and these are for restaurants that might not normally do delivery services, that are now shifting their business to be really focused on delivery and pickup. And a big way that they're doing that is with discounts off or family meals or buy one, give one type behavior. Again, a few samples of hundreds of what we've seen out there, but to really encourage business to keep their doors open. And then we're also seeing delivery services help support that. So most of the delivery services are lowering fees or holding off on fees for the restaurants so that they can use their money wisely as they're going through this hard time. They're offering free delivery to consumers. Even the Seamless example here, your orders can help save restaurants. We know that we're in this time where restaurants are at a huge risk because business is going down so quickly, similar to hotels and airlines. So how can we help the organization itself as well as the people that work for them, and really drive that business? And then finally, some examples of what we're seeing in those day-to-day modifications and what that's doing to the communications. So as government regulations are changing across the country, we're seeing things from, this is a local pizza place by me on the left, that they're actually saying, we're going to deliver your pizza, and then our delivery guy is going to step back 6 feet to keep that distance for both their safety and your safety. We've lifted liquor laws in New York, so a lot of places are promoting that you can, get a taco bar and a pitcher of margarita. And then organizations that have multiple ways that you can get their food from pickup, delivery, drive-through, et cetera, are really promoting those in those emails. And I think to Tom's point, that's probably why we're not seeing as much of a decrease as they're trying to push that business forward while they're still open. And we are starting to see closures happen, at least in New York and in other highly impacted areas. So I'll hand it over to Julio. I think, that the restaurant organization and the hospitality are great examples of industries that are getting hit really hard, but they're still giving back. They're still trying to work together, and our communities are still trying to support these different organizations, which I think is a nice takeaway even in all of this hardship. So Julio, over to you on retail.
Awesome. Thanks, Al and Tom for those insights. Before I continue with retail, I wanted to say that we're seeing a great number of questions come in. So please continue to ask them in the module at the bottom of your screen. We're also going to be sharing these slides in conjunction with the recording. So if some of these are a little text heavy, you'll be able to digest them at your own pace. So I think it's apparent to everyone on the webinar that travel and hospitality have been the most immediately impacted. And there's a lot that we can learn from the strategies that they're employing. And as you mentioned, it feels like the situation is changing minute by minute. And what I'm taking away from travel and hospitality is that we need to be able to react quickly, adapting to a rapidly changing landscape. And that's something that's shared with the retail vertical. So with that, let's jump into what we're seeing in the retail space. One big thing that we noticed is a change in the tone of the CEO messages. This is not advancing. There we go. So they've changed from following the cookie cutter, here's what's happening and here's what we're doing approach, and they're morphing these messages into "we're in it together" messages. And the key change here is that these messages are now focused on the value that the brand is bringing to the consumer. So these companies are really doubling down on showing a partnership with their customers. But the question I had was, is there more of a focus on who is being targeted with these messages? Because for a little bit there, it honestly felt like these CEO messages were being sent to the full file, almost going back to the old days of batch and blast. And based on what MailCharts is hearing from the field, we're seeing that major segmentation changes are not happening yet. But as we adjust to this new normal of a sustained pandemic, the expectation is that personalization and real-time messaging is going to become mission critical. And that prediction is further underscored by the sheer number of campaigns that are being canceled to reevaluate messaging, with 71% of respondents stating that that's the case in their organizations. So one way we're seeing brands communicate their value is by diving headfirst into this new reality of working from home. This is one of those few times where we as marketers know that what much of our customer base is experiencing. They're all experiencing a very similar situation. So shying away from addressing that shared experience would actually be a mistake. And you can see in these examples that brands are prominently surfacing the work from home trend while still making the message about the customer and the value that the brand brings. So these messages are still subtle, but are providing that clear value proposition on how they're making the customer's work from home life a little bit better. So to say it a little bit more succinctly, these communications clearly make the customer needs the number one priority. But just like working from home, there's other messages that are being included. So Tom, can you tell us a little bit more about how brands are talking about the current situation, what data you're seeing in the MailCharts platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been seeing the rate of using the terminology, specifically COVID coronavirus, is much lower. I think this may serve to reason as well. We wouldn't expect to have quite as much of a direct impact like in the industries we had just looked at. Yet, once we start to look more at are people referencing it from time to time, yeah, it's a similar rate of does a brand talk about it over the past couple of weeks? And that's actually going down. So when we think about the next phase, going from a direct message, Julio's tweet that he shared with every brand of all time sending COVID emails, in the retail world, and we've looked at a couple hundred apparel brands, are quickly shifting and trending away as they adjust that messaging, and they're more contextual. So here we're seeing a much higher trend of addressing home, work from home. These are terms that are suddenly appearing and are really bubbling up to the top in the apparel industry. But contrast that with something that's CEO focused or supporting the customer. Brands are really starting to look at how does their merchandising and their overall messaging change while still sending. And we see that they continue to send at a pretty similar clip as before. There was a question that was asked about sending times. This is super too early to make a final judgment, but we are seeing some brands maybe shifting up the brands we looked at earlier in the day than that has been the case over the past 90 days. And so we are starting to see that send times may be tested with as that messaging changes as well.
Great, thank you. I think there's something to be said about being relevant in whatever COVID messaging you're putting in your communications, making sure that it fits nicely with the rest of the promo or trigger message. And I do think it's okay for there to be some type of direct reference to the coronavirus, because we shouldn't shy away from the reality of the situation. And what we're seeing with our clients is a significant uptick in the use of what we're calling a critical message app to surface that direct messaging. So this app is basically a blank pixel that's placed in the HTML template and then is activated as needed by the marketer to display a relevant message, even after the email has been deployed and is in the consumer's inbox. So you can see it in action, particularly in the REI example on the right, where the critical messaging was quickly changed from free shipping until 3/27 to free shipping while stores are closed. And this updated across every single communication, even the ones already in the inbox. And for our clients on the line, you may have seen yesterday's blog post, but this is now available to all Movable Ink clients at no cost. Another trend that we're seeing is retailers' response to the epidemic. These brands are communicating value through corporate social responsibility, and you can expect that they're going to highlight this messaging in their email communications. And as a side note, it is great to see that these brands are stepping up to help manufacture protective gear. And as mentioned earlier, if consumers are really going to be looking at how companies are acting during this crisis in their future purchasing decisions, then you can expect that a lot of brands are going to showcase any and all efforts that the company is shouldering to sort of combat this epidemic. And before wrapping up on my section, I do want to bring the topic back to some tactical elements. So certainly everything that we've been talking about, personalization, focusing on the brand value, and real-time messaging, those are all integral tools in a marketer's arsenal right now. But there's another reality that we're hearing more and more around preparing for additional supply chain challenges. We've heard a lot about store closures because of quarantine rules being in effect. But what's also happening is that many brands are having to close not only stores, but also their e-com sites because their supply warehouses are not considered essential businesses during quarantine. Only their distribution centers are. So this means that they're not able to get their hands on additional inventory. And we heard from 2 retailers who are down to their last warehouse to pull stock from. So depending on how long this lasts, we're going to see a huge lack of inventory and lots of delayed orders. So given these new supply chain realities, we're seeing more of our clients rely on inventory APIs to showcase only the items that are actually in stock at the moment the email is opened. Also leveraging that same API and marrying it with website behavior to surface relevant back-in-stock messaging. And then lastly, being very transparent in both promotional messages as well as transactional messages about the status of deliveries. And you can see that in that shipping tracker on the right. So those are some of the key trends that we're seeing in retail. And now I'll pass it over to Naveen Wall, who'll share some brand insights in media and technology.
Thanks, Julio. That note on supply center issues is really interesting. You would never think naturally that could be a blocker in the process of policy doing so. You wouldn't naturally expect that, but really good call out there. Okay, so jumping into media and technology, we've got some really interesting stats here from Tom and the MailChart team specific to media and technology emails. Much like many of our verticals, we're seeing a high number, 31% of direct references to the pandemic. So it's definitely top of mind. What I found really interesting is some of the trending terminology that's highlighted here. Tom, would you be able to speak a bit more to that?
Within the brands sampled for the media and the technology sector, we are seeing a bit more focus on safety, staying healthy, supportive, both for their audience, their customers, but also the workforce in general. And one of the other things is almost the board from the industries. If we said what is significant, what's really trending bubbling to the top, every industry really highly indexed for coronavirus and COVID terms. Media and technology, these brands did not. It was not bubbling up to the top. It was more around staying healthy, support, and campaign volume has decreased as well within this sector. But the messaging piece was something that we found really jumped out different to on aggregate as well as industry by industry.
That's really interesting. And it actually makes complete sense because these media and technology companies have the resources to help us adjust and adapt to this new reality that we're in. And whilst it might not be a primary goal, a byproduct of providing that added value around those areas is building trust with customers and even prospects alike. So it may be beneficial really in the longer term for organizations. And as you said as well, send volume is definitely decreasing. We're seeing less batch and blast messages and really seeing organizations take a step back and really consider what their messaging is, if it's driving value to their customers, and then target appropriately to segments. And this first trend that we're going to focus on here from technology companies really reflects those trends that we've been seeing in health and support being called out. I won't go into all of these examples. As you know, this webinar is being recorded, so you can read this in your own leisure in more detail. But one company that I do want to highlight here is Audible. They're a really fantastic example of an organization providing support to communities. As we've seen schools close down, they're now offering hundreds of free audiobooks to children with their new Stories product. That's available in 6 languages, so you can imagine they're building global customer trust there by offering a new valuable product at no additional cost, which is really needed during these trying times. And we're also seeing technology organizations provide support around remote working and helping us adapt to this new normal that we're now in. Both of these examples up on the screen address a shift in our new reality. And these organizations are offering products, services, and discounts to add value and help customers adapt. And we spoke in our last webinar about how we were seeing several news outlets dropping their paywalls as a means of a public service and really in the interest of public safety. So again, one of those key terms, safety, that we've been seeing trend. In response to that, we've seen traffic increases of approximately 60% across different news outlets. Again, building trust with consumers, providing them vital information during these critical times. But beyond just removing those paywalls, we're also seeing media and entertainment outlets adapt further. We're definitely seeing increased notifications around coronavirus, and that could be via push or email. But that, of course, can be really overwhelming. There's a lot of information out there, and that may not be what consumers really want to see. They may not want to be bombarded with all of that information in one go. So an approach that really stood out to me was one that the BBC adopted. They sent out a push notification asking customers whether they wanted to opt in to coronavirus notifications. And I think just there, that level of control that you provide to customers is really valuable. Again, it can be really overwhelming, so you may want to limit that constant exposure to them and give them the choice over their preferences. We're also seeing TV networks and OTT services follow suit. Some of their paywalls are now being dropped for various news channels. So again, in the effort to maintain public safety and share information. We're also seeing some interesting trends around the OTT space. Of course, streaming is up. Consumers are definitely looking to streaming distract and occupy time. In fact, Nielsen are predicting an uptick of 60% in TV viewership as quarantine increases. So for this reason, several of our clients are focusing their efforts around personalization and relevance. And with vast and increasingly fragmented content libraries, it can be challenging to discover what you want to watch. A low-lift way to aid personalized content discovery is to ask consumers to lean in a little bit and tell us more about their mood. 1 in 5 streamers note that what they watch is highly driven by their mood at that time of engagement. So in this email example that we have here, by leveraging scratch-off functionalities, we can ask streamers to lean in, tell us about their mood, and then in turn, once they scratch off a box, we can reveal a relevant, curated, personalized content piece that matches their mood. And then continuing with that trend of distracting and occupying your time, we're seeing a change to the way content is being released. Several organizations are pulling forward on content release dates as a means of surprising existing subscribers, but also acquiring new ones. And Disney Plus is a really great example here. They pulled forward their release date for Frozen 2 by 3 months ahead of its scheduled release date. And I'm sure that was much to the relief of many parents as this pandemic first started really accelerating. And we're also seeing movie theaters close down. We're seeing organizations release blockbuster hits directly available to rent and stream. So I'm sure we'll see an uptick there as well. Moving on to the impact to sports and events programming. Of course, we've seen several sports leagues, races, and matches being challenged as social distancing becomes mandated. Organizations are responding with various solutions. We're seeing paywalls being moved on older games. Some games are moving forward, but they're happening behind closed doors, so they're being televised to audiences. And then to fill programming spots for cancellations, we're also seeing creative new content being published, like filmed podcasts, allowing fans to still engage with the sport, but really putting it in place of the actual games themselves. But I think the most creative strategy that we're seeing is a shift to esports. This strategy is really being adopted to maintain fan engagement and also to reach new global audiences. We saw Formula One continued with their Bahrain Grand Prix through virtual gaming. Actual drivers were able to join this game remotely and take part in the race, and that was streamed for live audiences. And then similarly, the Phoenix Suns are also continuing to play their season on NBA 2K, which is being streamed via Twitch. And that shift to virtual gatherings is also being adopted by live event organizations who are similarly challenged in this space. We're seeing some concerts and festivals that were due to take place as public events are now shifting to virtually hosted events. Again, opening up to that global audience, but also providing a sense of community as we all work through this situation and share this experience together. So with that, I'm going to hand off to Jackie, who's going to walk us through trends that we're seeing in the financial services industry.
Great. Thank you, Naveen. I've definitely been sort of living and breathing my streaming services right now, so all very interesting. Given the nature of, financial services emails and sort of all the privacy walls around those emails, a little bit difficult to get to some of that, aggregate data that we might see in mail charts for some of these other verticals. But we are seeing a few key strategy changes in email communications in the space. So first off, we're seeing that companies are incredibly focused on driving mobile and online account sign up and on educating customers how to use those tools so that they can stay out of branches. We're also seeing a lot of messaging around providing notification and education on policy changes that are being made to support customers. So things like changes to fees, rates, and terms. We're also seeing institutions provide, regular updates and tips based on customers' locations. So things like changes to branch hours and availability. And then we're also seeing messages largely in the investment and wealth management space that really address market volatility and offer things like virtual consultation and articles and perspectives. So many institutions, have changed their policies to provide customers with more flexible offerings and to help with financial hardship. And this is usually being communicated sort of as a call out within a longer email that talks about, the full suite of support that the company's providing. Some of our clients have started to use that critical messaging app to put these notices at the top of what would be normal promotional messages. So you can see a couple examples here. So Citi, over on the left, offers its retail bank customers fee waivers on monthly service fees and relaxes penalties on early CD withdrawal. They also offer credit line increases and collection tolerance and hardship programs for customers with loans and mortgages. Capital One, right in the center, noted that while their ATMs are going to continue to stay open, they're also waiving fees when customers use out-of-network ATMs. And, a lot of banks have offered similar types of help. Some of the most common types of policy changes that we've seen to date have been payment and interest pauses on loans and credit cards, those ATM and penalty waivers, as mentioned, credit line increases, and extension of offer expiration dates. We've also just started seeing that some institutions are either, changing or launching new products, mainly in the lending space, to reflect customer needs. So something that US Bank did, and I wouldn't be surprised if, other institutions are already thinking of doing this, is that they launched a product that is sort of similar to a payday loan, which essentially allows customers to take out small loans to cover short-term expenses. So US Bank launched what is called a simple loan, and customers who already have an existing checking account can take up to $1,000 and pay it back in increments. A lot of banks have previously sunsetted these types of products because they didn't see a ton of customer adoption, but there's definitely more of a need now for these when people need, a short-term extra line of cash to cover basic expenses. The other trend that we mentioned we're seeing primarily in the banking and credit card space is a lot of communication that drives customers to be able to service their account digitally through an online account, through a mobile app, or through AI assistance. And the messaging around these digital services is that it's really a way to avoid lengthy call center wait times and a way for customers to stay out of physical branches. So we can see a few, great examples up here. Over on the left, Capital One included a video tutorial in their email that helps customers learn how to use the mobile app. Bank of America promoted use of their Erica AI assistant. And then something really helpful that Amex did, which was that they listed out, a lengthy menu of all the things that customers might need to do to manage their account. And then for each one of those actions, they linked out to a section on their site, which just makes it a lot more, easy for a customer to navigate to all of these services on site. And then Citi over on the right did a similar thing where they listed out, nearly everything and anything that you can do using one of these digital services. And then shifting over to the types of communications that we're seeing being sent from companies that are in the investing, trading, and asset management space. So a lot of what these companies have sent to date has really been messages of reassurance and educational resources on all the volatility that we've seen in the stock market. So, last week, a lot of people, including myself, saw that their portfolios or their retirement funds took big losses. So these companies have really quickly put up resources on their sites to offer some perspective on this. E-Trade over on the left sent a note that directed customers to a section of their site that has a really great article from their VP of investment strategy speaking to, how to deal with market swings and how customers should look at their assets during this time. Vanguard in the center there sent an email with a link to a video where their leadership talks about market changes and all of the resources that are available to customers. And then Betterment over on the right sent sort of more servicing-oriented messages. So they sent a communication to customers who had high-yield cash accounts where they addressed all of the changes to interest rates that are being made by the Fed. And then they also send notifications to customers that their investment portfolios may have been rebalanced in light of all these market changes. So wanted to do a quick spotlight on PayPal and the types of communications that we're seeing from digital banking and payment platforms. So PayPal and other similar platforms have really doubled down on messaging around how people can use person-to-person payments and digital money transfers. This is something that we're seeing being heavily utilized right now. Over on the left, PayPal encouraged use of their P2P products like Venmo. Then in the center, they promoted their Xoom product to allow customers to transfer money to loved ones abroad. And this is obviously, incredibly timely given what's happening around the globe. And then over on the right, they send acknowledgments and thank you notes when customers use their platform to make donations to charities, which I thought was just a really nice touch given how many people are donating right now. And then last up, just to wrap up, there are a ton of different ways that critical messaging app mentioned earlier can be used across financial services emails, but just a few examples. So over on the left, for customers who maybe live in highly impacted areas where most of the branches might be closed, that critical messaging banner can be displayed to address branch closures and then link out to an app or online banking. It could also be used to tell customers that, say, the call center is experiencing really lengthy wait times and drive customers to the app or their online account. In the center, it could be used to direct customers to branches with drive-through options if maybe their local branch doesn't have one. And then most importantly, it can be used to communicate some of those fee and policy changes that we mentioned earlier over on the right. So maybe notifying a customer that their payment can be deferred, a fee is waived, or that an offer has been extended for them. So with that, I will hand it over to Allison.
Thank you so much, Jackie. So I think we're just going to quickly wrap up some of the key themes that we saw throughout this webinar, and then I'd love to open it to questions. We've had some great questions come through in the chat, so please take a second if you have one and post it there. But we sort of had a big conversation as a team and pulled together 3, but I will say that there are probably at least a dozen consistent themes. And I will say, from having spent, a good 15 plus years collectively working in email, there has been no other time I can think of where across every vertical, every marketer has had basically a similar playbook in what they're dealing with. Like, usually there is sort of a loose frame of what email marketers and communications professionals are working from, but then it gets very specialized on the vertical level. And this is the first time I can ever think of on a global level where every industry is being gripped by such similar communication challenges. So that, I think, is just worth noting and is interesting. So I think the first piece, just going back to Julio's funny tweet, the reminder to add value and utility. And I think it is also worth noting, like, people are interested in knowing about your corporate response from like a CSR standpoint. And so without virtue signaling and saying, look how great we are by doing this, is there an authentic way to update customers on that? Either, can they participate in that effort, or direct donated supplies, what role could they play, or where's the utility in them knowing this? Maybe it's that you're redirecting phone service people to support, repurposing hotels for frontline workers. Maybe you want to explain that and then let them know about what you're doing. So, but again, nobody wants to know more about your CEO and how he thinks we're all in this together. The next piece is around, planning ahead. And I think that, this is a piece that's really come to the forefront. Is we had a internal customer advisory board meeting just earlier this week, and someone was mentioning that their executive team is meeting 3 times a day, and they're coming out of that meeting with directives for the comms team. And that's nuts, because we all know that if you have a legacy process that's a waterfall process on any part of your life cycle communications, that is impossible to implement instantly. And a lot of organizations are in the midst of multi-year transformations, but there's just a part of the tech stack that's never been gotten to. And so, I would say, to the extent that you can, what can you do now to plan ahead, right? Because there are a couple things that we know are going to come. One is there is going to be surges in demand. And the next thing, probably there are going to be pockets where, the pandemic will surge again. And so how can you right now do things structurally and operationally? I think every marketer knows what they want to do. It's how do you do it? So spending time either with your tech partners, with your vendors, and mapping out operationally how you can get those things done. I think we showcased a couple of instances where the critical messaging app is useful, but there are definitely other things you can do, whether it's repurposing how your team is working, doing different kinds of scrums and stand-ups. Not every organization is fully agile yet, so maybe there's ways that you could adopt those tactics now. And then also, relying on partners. I will say we are, it feels like sometimes we have that like Superman hearing because, we work across about 750 organizations globally. And so we are seeing so much happen in real time. And we're obviously happy to share it. I would think about who else do you have in your tech stack or sort of in your kitchen cabinet who can support you in accelerating your learning. Because obviously you have a really important role to play on the front lines of this. I think the importance of email has never been more apparent in being the most personal communication channel to customers. So how can you draw on the learnings that partners like Movable Ink and MailCharts are seeing to rapidly influence what you're doing, almost in real time? So I think we're going to shift over to questions. So Kristen, do you want to share a couple questions that we've gotten in the chat?
Sure. So if you have any questions, now is the time to submit that through the Q&A box of your webinar console. And we already have a lot of great ones coming in, so we'll just jump right in. So the first one that I see here is, are you seeing a lot of brands creating fun and interactive emails to help promote brand awareness in an entertaining way?
Yeah, I'll take this one. I answered it in the chat box, but I thought it was an interesting one to share with the rest of the attendees as well. So yes, my notes are gone. What we're seeing is that a lot of brands are leveraging are really focusing on driving brand awareness through things like AR. So, we're all stuck at home. And so they're showing things like, hey, picture yourself on the beach for when this is all over, or, your ideal destination if you weren't home. We're also seeing things like, a poll kind of like, are you working from home now? And if so, are you dress on top, pajamas on the bottom? Or are you bathrobe all the way and your camera's off? So kind of being a little bit playful about the current situation, but marrying that brand awareness, that playfulness, that interactivity with actual value that they're bringing to the customer. So pairing it with actual strategies that are driving on business goals, whether that's moving product or surfacing products that are relevant at this time, or just driving on personalization. So pulling in content around the relationship that the individual has had with the brand before.
Awesome. Thanks, Julio. So we have a question around engagement patterns. So it says, have you seen a shift in engagement patterns as a result of people accessing their inboxes from home now? And then just trying to figure out the best days and times, but the optimized send date and time may no longer be true. So are we seeing any kind of shift in those patterns as a result from people accessing their inboxes from home?
We've reviewed, so I think we kind of touched on a few things where the sending behavior largely, so that we've seen some small decreases in specific industries. Days of week, certainly there hasn't been much of a change. But time of day, I think that's a really good question. And to maybe wrap up the question into a bite-sized package is the rhetorical question. Is there a best send time anymore? Is there an optimal send time anymore? And I think that's a really great question. And we've seen some early day, like we said, in the apparel category where things are shifting a little bit earlier in the day. Anecdotally, we've spoken with email marketers, and one sent an email at 4:45 on a Friday, which in this person's market was historically a brutal time to send, and they had one of the best campaigns they've had in weeks. And so I think that there is very much a very ripe opportunity to consider the send strategy and the send times. And just like with everything that's going on, using your ESP, using that MarTech stack, as Allison said, and those partners to do that testing and see what's best for you. But it's very likely that there's a huge opportunity to question what was quote unquote normal, just like everything in our lives. What was normal 2 weeks ago very well may have some interesting results for you individually. And what we're seeing just happen is that there may be some changes as campaigns are updated and edited. So that's a really great question to test and to review.
Awesome. And we have time to squeeze in one more question. This one says, everyone seems to be moving 1,000,000 miles an hour at our organization. What are you seeing other orgs doing to combat that feeling of frenzy? Do you want to take that one, Julio?
Sure. I have been in the middle of that frenzy as I've been supporting some of our clients. What I've seen is that leadership is really stepping up, as they should, in creating the cross-functional task forces that Allison alluded to earlier. But aside from that, I think if you're in doubt, just pause your campaigns. You should take the time to rebuild any messages that are going out and make sure that they're really sensitive to the current situation. Because the reality is the last thing that you want to do right now is alienate any customers. It's better that email gets delayed by a day than have everybody unsubscribe because the messages that you're sending out are just so irrelevant and just not really sensitive to the current situation.
Awesome. Thank you, Julio. Well, that just about brings us to the end of our presentation. I would once again like to thank MailCharts and the Movable Link strategy team for their presentations today. And a big thanks for sticking with us. We know we had some connectivity issues. So thank you so much for sticking with us through this webinar. And please be on the lookout for the recording and the slides of this webinar in your inbox next week. So once again, thank you for joining us and have a great weekend.